An old oil lamp in the church flickered in the draught, the light and shadow dancing, illuminating Marcus's mud-caked body. Waking from his stupor, Marcus went through a brief period of confusion and panic before recognizing the old priest before him. The priest helped Marcus sit on a long bench in the foyer. Marcus was trembling, clutching the priest's sleeve tightly, his panic obvious even beneath the layer of mud on his face. The priest listened as he stammered out his story, piecing together a suffocating night, the rose room at the motel, the terrifying scene of the female corpse breathing on the men repeatedly, and his final escape. His narrative was disjointed and filled with terror. Yet the story chilled the old priest to the bone, stirring up the anxiety that had just begun to subside. The priest's hand was also shaking slightly, his heart pounding against his chest. He gently disengaged from Marcus and stood up, walking toward a desk against the wall where an old-fashioned landline telephone sat. It was a 1990 model, its plastic casing yellowed, the receiver worn smooth, and the dark green cable coiled around the table leg like an old snake. His finger slipped several times as he dialed. The church bell chimed 6 times, each toll sounding like it came from the depths of an abyss. The phone's long drawn-out ring echoed in the hall, until finally, someone answered at the other end. The priest began to speak, his voice trembling, almost masked by the tremor in his throat. He mentioned a female corpse in an unnatural embrace with a bronze statue at the church, and a mentally distraught survivor claiming 3 others might be dead inside a motel. The brief, absurd statement left the line silent for a moment. At the police station on the other end, the night shift dispatcher's breathing caught. The mundane sound of typing and coffee cups clinking suddenly ceased. The surveillance light above the dispatch console blinked twice. The duty sergeant looked up, staring at the address on the screen. Street Michael's Chapel. That location hadn't filed a report in 5 years. In just seconds, the air in the station thickened. The dispatcher and the sergeant swallowed audibly. The duty sergeant instinctively typed, rapidly logging the information. Priest report. Extremely unusual body. Survivor alleges 3 others need checking. Given the potential casualties at the motel, the duty sergeant unhesitatingly set the initial response level to suspicious death emergency assistance event. The dispatch center's radio frequency switched from the routine channel to the D2 investigation band. A brief bulletin was entered into the system. Street Michael's Chapel abnormal report. 1 body found at the scene. 3 others need checking. 1 surviving witness, unstable mental state. Patrol car P12 proceed immediately to verify situation. A police car's red and blue lights flashed in the breaking dawn, cutting through the dense white fog. The shrill siren pierced the morning stillness, racing towards Street Michael's Chapel. Inside the church, the old priest still held the phone. After listening to the reply, he slowly placed the receiver down. He pressed his forehead against the cold desktop, whispering a prayer barely audible. Lord, save them. He slowly straightened up, seeing that Marcus had slipped back into a troubled sleep on the bench. With heavy steps, he walked to the altar and knelt on the cold stone floor, drawing the sign of the cross over his chest. He began to pray for solace for Marcus's soul, for the lives that were lost, and for spiritual protection for the law enforcement officers who would soon arrive. The rain outside had begun to subside, but the cold wind still rattled the church's stained glass windows, making a sustained, unsettling noise that spoke of the unfinished nightmare. Grayish-white light struggled to penetrate the low-hanging clouds, and mist enveloped the solitary country church on the Nebraska plains. The piercing siren and the sound of tires crunching over wet gravel grew from distant to near, followed by the rude roar of an engine and the dull slam of car doors. These noises from the real world brutally shattered the stagnant silence surrounding the church. Kearney County Sheriff Bill Henderson and his two deputies, Jenkins and Davis, got out of the P-12 patrol car. Their leather boots made faint squishing sounds on the rain-soaked grass. The sheriff habitually scanned the surroundings, his gaze moving past the crooked wooden fence and the empty churchyard. Then his gaze froze, a chill shot from his tailbone to the crown of his head, making his scalp prickle. He had handled many cases, car crashes, shootings, domestic murders, and had seen remains after animal attacks. But the scene before him was entirely outside his realm of experience, shocking his lifelong perception of reality. By the church's main door, the weather-beaten, dark green bronze statue of Jesus was the focal point of a bizarre tableau. A young woman's body, in a stiff posture, was tightly, almost melted into the cold metal sculpture. Her arms were wrapped around the statue's torso like iron clamps, her knuckles white and distorted. Her face was pressed against the bronze shoulder, as if in a desperate confession. "Oh, God!" Deputy Jenkins gasped, his voice sounding choked. Even the usually steady veteran Detective Davis instinctively crossed himself, a low curse escaping his lips. Just then, the church's heavy wooden door opened with a grating creak. The silhouette of the old priest, Father Samuel, appeared in the doorway. His wrinkled face was devoid of color, like a dried-out parchment, etched with exhaustion and terror. He had clearly been alerted by the siren and had come out to meet them. "Father," Henderson's voice was low. He forced his eyes away from the nightmarish sight and turned to the priest. "Please tell me briefly what happened here and if there are other casualties." The priest's voice was hoarse and heavy. "There's a survivor asleep in the foyer, but there are 3 other men at the Kearney Creek Motel. I don't know if they're alive or dead." Henderson's lips pressed into a thin line and his facial muscles twitched a few times. He instantly issued a series of sharp commands. "Davis, set up the perimeter tape immediately and seal off the scene. Log everyone entering and leaving. Ensure the safety of the survivor and the father, and strictly prohibit anyone or any animal from approaching the body until MDI arrives. Jenkins, get the camera. Take close-up photos of key evidence. Then, you're coming with me to the motel immediately." As soon as he finished speaking, the 2 deputies rushed to the patrol car's trunk. Davis opened it and pulled out the bright yellow caution tape, and Jenkins followed, taking out his camera. The cold click of the shutter rang out, the blinding white flash repeatedly cutting through the gloomy morning fog. Henderson glanced toward the church door at Marcus's condition, nodding to the old priest, signaling him to care for Marcus. After confirming the scene status, Henderson picked up his handheld radio and quickly reported to headquarters. P-12, calling headquarters. Church scene is highly unusual. Sealed off, and Davis assigned to hold position. Request headquarters immediately contact the MDI to come over. Currently proceeding with Jenkins to the motel to check on the other 3. The moment he finished speaking, Henderson and Jenkins got back into the car, sirens wailing, and the patrol vehicle shot like an arrow from a bow toward the Kearney Creek Motel, a few miles away. In front of the church's main entrance, Deputy Davis was still setting up the yellow caution tape. The words Kearney County Sheriff's Office, crime scene, do not cross, formed a glaring boundary that cordoned off the horror. The patrol car had not yet fully stopped when old Walter Green and his son Sean rushed out in a panic. The old man's face was ashen, his lips trembling, and he shouted hoarsely, "Dead. They're all dead. The door was open. Emily is gone. And one of the young men is missing too. Which room?" Sheriff Henderson demanded sharply, simultaneously signaling Deputy Jenkins to secure the area. "The one at the very end, the Rose Room." Sean's voice was barely a whisper. His entire body was curled up and shaking like a leaf in the wind. Yellow caution tape quickly isolated the motel. Henderson and Deputy Jenkins cautiously stepped into the innermost Rose Room. Despite their mental preparation, the sight before them stopped both men's breathing. The air was permeated with a sickeningly sweet odor, mixed with a metallic, fishy smell. 3 male corpses were rigid on the cots in twisted positions, eyes wide open, their faces frozen in expressions of ultimate terror, full photographic evidence. Henderson ordered in a low voice. Shutter clicks sounded in succession in the dead silence. He immediately requested backup via radio. P-12 calling headquarters. 3 male bodies discovered at the Kearney Creek Motel. Cause of death suspicious. Immediately need 4 additional officers for scene control and dispatch MDI to the location. Also requesting state police assistance. The police dispatch center quickly activated the highest emergency response. Approximately an hour later, the reinforcing officers and the county medical death investigator, MDI, were the first to arrive at the motel. The investigation inside the motel room proceeded methodically. The MDI personally supervised the photography, directing officers to measure and sketch the scene. The 3 victims' personal belongings were bagged and tagged, and technicians meticulously collected fingerprints from various surfaces. In his preliminary notes, the MDI specifically noted the room's abnormal coldness and the indescribable, strange odor. As soon as the motel scene was processed, the MDI and Henderson drove back to the church. At the church, the operation to separate the female corpse met with incomprehensible resistance from the start. The corpse's arms seemed to be fused to the bronze statue, impossibly cold and rigid. Henderson spat in frustration and stepped up to help personally. 3 grown men strained with all their might, their grunts echoing in the cold air. They wrestled with an invisible giant, muscles tense, cold sweat beading on their foreheads. Finally, with a grating teeth-clinching sound, a mix of twisting metal and cracking rock, the corpse was forcibly peeled away and fell to the grass with a thud, still maintaining that eerie, embracing posture. An even more chilling discovery followed. On the hard bronze surface, where the corpse had been wrapped, there were several clear indentations and deep scratches, the imprint of fingernails. It was as if she had embraced not metal, but soft clay. Marcus, the sole survivor of the incident, underwent continuous questioning and psychological evaluation. His mental state was on the brink of collapse. The 4 of us came out for a conference, he tearfully repeated, his eyes distant. Now only I am left. If I go back like this, who will believe such an absurd story? Everyone will think I'm crazy. Or worse, that I was involved in their deaths. Witnessing the strangeness of the scene firsthand, Henderson deeply understood Marcus's predicament and suffering. After confirming that Marcus's testimony aligned with the key details in the scene investigation records, he acted out of compassion, enduring the pressure to issue Marcus a detailed copy of the incident report. This document objectively recorded all the anomalous phenomena and bore Henderson's signature and badge number. He also proactively contacted Marcus's company and family, officially describing the tragedy that defied imagination. The Greens, father and son, were also rigorously investigated. Rumors about the true cause of Sean's wife Emily's death had circulated in the town, with some speculating about foul play. However, the police could not find any direct connection between them and the 3 deceased men. They could hardly file charges of corpse murder. Weeks later, the final autopsy conclusions arrived, officially defining the case. The autopsy report for the 3 men showed no signs of external trauma or toxins. The cause of death was ruled undetermined, speculated to be malignant cardiac arrhythmia induced by extreme terror. The report specifically noted that the intensity of this physiological reaction far exceeded any known medical case. Emily's autopsy report was even more baffling. Her rigor mortis was abnormal, with muscle and joint hardness comparable to metal. Her physiological state completely defied medical explanation. The MDI wrote in the conclusion section, "Undetermined, but accompanied by unexplainable post-mortem physiological anomalies." Because the nature of the case was completely outside normal procedure, a special circumstance memorandum, jointly signed by the county sheriff, state detectives, and the MDI, officially classified the case as a permanent cold case, anomaly event, and recommended sealing the files. The Greens were ultimately only heavily fined for violating health and safety codes. The Kearney Creek Motel soon closed and was boarded up. They sold their property and vanished. Only the bronze statue of Jesus in front of the country church was left with several eerie indentations on its arms and body that could never be repaired. The old priest, Father Samuel, did not replace the statue, but instead held multiple solemn and ancient exorcism rituals for the statue and the church grounds. And he prayed before the sculpture every morning. When someone asked him why he wouldn't replace the statue, he merely shook his head. Those are the traces left by faith. No one knew that every dawn, as he prayed alone before the statue, the shadows cast still held the shape, the posture of a woman, her arms embracing the bronze.